Hello, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed look into my creative process. I'm Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, illustrator, designer, and your pal. And I'm excited and appreciative to have everyone back again this week. Episode 194. Before we get into it, I want to share something that I also shared last week, but the progression of images continues on. I collaborated with a musician pal of mine named Jared Farney to create visuals for a concept album that he's putting together, or that he put together and will be released in the next few weeks here. So every day on both of our Instagram accounts, we've been putting out crops and sort of zoomed in images of an area on like a large video game style map that it correlates with each, like a track on his album. So each one has its own sort of vibe. Each one has its own visuals and its own location on an overall game map. And once the tracks are all released individually, his full album will be available to stream all over the place. And then we'll also release the full game map that you can see with titles and everything like that. So really excited about that. Go check out the Instagram page and check out the previews for each of these tracks, and there's lots more of that coming soon. This is the image that was released today. So, cool. That being said, I have to potentially apologize or just issue a fair warning. We're having some work done in the house today, and so there might be some slamming and banging that you hear in the background. So please forgive any additional noise, but the practice must go on. We must continue our work regardless of the circumstances we find ourselves in. And as you can see with the reference image I have pulled up here, I'm kind of excited about this. This one harkens back to sort of my teenage, adolescent years. I was an avid skateboarder growing up. I think part of, certainly a huge part of my influence visually has been all the amazing skateboard graphics and like the visual ephemera that went along with that sort of skateboarding culture of the 90s. Ed Templeton, who was a professional skateboarder and an artist, put together this graphic and many other really amazing, super inspiring and informative skateboard graphics for the company Toy Machine that he rode for. So I encourage you to go research Ed Templeton and some of his art. I may even revisit some of the characters that he designed back in the day. I've recently rediscovered some of this stuff after not looking at it for a really long time. And, it sort of brought me back and it made me realize, this at least to a certain extent is kind of what brought me to where I am today and to make the kind of images that I like to make today. So, little homage to Toy Machine and to Ed Templeton this week on the practice. So let's dive in. This should be fairly simple to model, but I want to get some of the details right, and I want to sort of interpret this in my own way, so that we're it's not just a direct copy. That we've got a little bit of sort of variation there. So let's think here. I think we'll obviously start with building out the character here. We'll make sort of this bust. I probably won't include the typography beneath. Got sort of these rounded shoulders, right? Got the head. Actually, what I might do, let's use a capsule for that. Now, I love these graphics that Ed Templeton came up with. They're really simple in terms of the amount of elements, but they're just super cool. A lot of personality, a lot of character built into what's really a rather simple drawing. And typically, I'm not a huge fan of what they'd call like naive or outsider art. I don't believe he had any training. I think he was a dude who just loved to draw these really wacky creatures. So, in any case, big fan. I'm just going to go ahead and make this cube editable. Delete this bottom section here. Should probably scoot this in so you guys can see the object manager. All right. And let's make a backup of these dudes. Again, for y'all just joining, having some work done on the house today. Apologize for the noise. There's probably going to be some banging and crashing that you're going to hear. So, deal with it. All right. So, I'm going to throw these in a volume measure, as I often do. Stick these guys together. You want them to be a single piece of geometry. Oops. What I also think I'm going to do is actually make this a little taller. We're going to have to reinterpret this just a little bit for 3D. I think I'm going to give myself a little bit more room on these shoulders. And I think we'll jump into the sculpting tools soon. But let's throw that in a mesher. See what we get. I mean, immediately that starts getting us pretty close. I'm just going to grab sculpt tools, holding shift and the closed bracket to make that brush larger. Now I'm holding shift just to smooth. What I think I'll want to do is use this volume mesh. I hate how it repositions it. I don't know how to get around that. That's going to give us a sort of a cleaner mesh to work with here. A more subdivided mesh. Allow me to make more smooth adjustments here. So, how is the audio at the moment? Are you guys hearing all this crashing and banging? Right now there's some folks in the attic above me pulling out our old HVAC system. I don't know if I've talked much about this, but my wife and I moved to Texas last year, and we bought a 35-year-old house, and we are realizing slowly, well, maybe not so slowly, we're definitely realizing as the months go on that 35-year-old houses have issues and need to have stuff replaced. So we are going through that at the moment. I think the head is just a little bit too large. Now, one of the few details on this character is these sort of prominent shoulder blades. So I want to include those. I'm holding shift to smooth some of this stuff out. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the front on view. Let's sort of start drawing this mouth in. That's another thing that is really prominent about this character, is just this very awesome sharp tooth mouth. Really simple, but very effective. And so let's just start drawing it in. Probably gonna have to adjust the angle. Shoot. You know what? I'm just gonna solo it out. And I'm doing this by hand. There is some variation in this drawing. It's not like a perfectly symmetrical character. And so I'm going to sort of lean into that and just leave some of the hand-drawn variation in here, which I think is going to look really good. I do think we need to make that a little larger. So just hit Control A for Select all. All right, fairly simple. Too big, as you can see, but we'll adjust all that. I think what I'll do is just use an extrude here. Does anyone remember these graphics from the 90's? Was Ed Templeton and or skateboarding graphics in general influential to any of you guys? What's up, K. Baroner? Not sure how you pronounce that. Sorry if I butchered it. Glad you like. So instead of, let's look at this. So instead of using a bool, what you can do is you can add this extrude into the volume builder, and under this hierarchy, you can set to subtract, which is really useful, but it sort of averages things out. So I'm not going to do that, actually. I'm going to use a Boolean, which is going to give us like an exact clean cut of this mouth shape. Let's do that. Let's throw a bool in there, or a boolie. What's up, Amala? Thanks for tuning in. Yes, the stream is automatically added. So pretty much every video on my channel comes from a stream. And they are always available to rewatch later. And if you miss something, just leave a comment. And I don't always get it, but I'm pretty good about responding to all the comments. I can usually go back and answer everyone's questions. What I'm also going to do is set up a camera angle. Apologize for the noise there. We're having work done in the house, as I said earlier in the stream, and the puppy is in protective mode. He is not happy about all the people banging and crashing around in the attic. So let's set up a camera here. So the camera is going to be important because I want to make sure that we get this kind of opening in the mouth right, and that's going to be dependent on the camera angle we use. So add a camera to the scene. I also think I'm going to go square format on this bad boy. Just go with 960 by 960, which is a good starting point. That's awesome to hear. K. Hroner. Maybe I'm getting that right, maybe not. Appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully they're useful. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll try to answer them. Be a fairly simple one though today. It might be good for beginner. So caps. I'm going to create single object. That should make it a little better. Maybe not. Not loving that. Now we've sort of got that opening going. What I'm going to do is add a protection tag to the camera because I always wind up moving that around. So under Cinema 4D tags, protection, that's going to make sure I don't move that camera. What's up, Godzilla? How you doing? You down with skateboarding graphics? Making this old toy machine sticker. As I was saying in the intro here, Ed Templeton made all of these really amazing graphics for toy machine skateboards that were really influential on me growing up. In fact, I don't think I appreciated how influential they'd wind up being until I sort of revisited them recently. I guess that's how influence works potentially, right? You realize in hindsight. Right, so that's a start. I don't have it perfect yet, but it's a start. I'm going to make a copy of this capsule, and then I'm going to hit C to expand it, and I'm going to hit this volume mesh, which is going to move the damn thing, which is annoying. First, I'm going to hit this this option button. I'm going to change some of the parameters here. This is going to make it a little bit easier for me to sculpt. I'm going to put it back where it was. Glad you like. I wish I could take credit for how cool this is. I'll keep bumping Ed Templeton, giving credit to him where it's due. Right, so we've got sort of a slope to the back of the head here. Get into. I think I want to make this come up here a little bit. Hunchback thing going on. And I'm going to hold shift, kind of smooth out the back of the head here. Right, getting pretty close. Well, making progress, let's put it that way. All right, now let's make some horns. Fairly simple. I'm just going to grab the pen tool. Thanks for the question, Godzilla. Inspiration, man, that's a tough thing to nail down exactly. I was talking about it a little bit earlier in this stream. Certainly some of my inspiration came from skateboarding graphics kind of early in life, right? Like sometimes inspiration is something we have directly in the moment. Like, you know, you're outside and you see a cool tree and you're like, oh, that is a cool tree. I'm going to go try and model that or draw that when I get home. Other times, inspiration is something that's a little more deep-seated, something that, you know, has been hiding in your psyche for years. I think this particular piece is an example of that. When I was a teenager, I thought these kind of skateboard graphics from the 90's were just awesome. I think they still are. And I sort of rediscovered them recently. And I guess it's not something that I had consciously thought about in the last few years, but certainly something that was very influential to me. So there's stuff like that. There's a great podcast that I listen to sometimes called the Creative Pep Talk Podcast. Some of you may have heard of that. Andy Miller is an illustrator who runs the podcast. Inspirational guy, cool podcast in a lot of ways. But he's been talking about lately, like going and purposely going back and revisiting some of the stuff you thought was awesome when you were younger. I think there was someone talking about like figuring out what the #1 song in the pop charts was when you were 13 years old. Just going and listening to that and seeing if it sparks anything. You could go, I don't know if there's old childhood books that you found really inspiring. Actually, you know what? I've got one right here that I'll share. When I was a kid, my mom got me these books by Ed Templeton, who gave you really simple step-by-step sort of instructions on how to draw these simple little characters and things. I remember spending hours drawing these. And this is another example of something that sort of, I think it was hidden in the back of the psyche for a while there, and sort of informs the type of work I like to make, even though it's not something I would consciously think about all the time. All right, now we got some horns going. Does that answer your question? I mean, inspiration can be kind of a nebulous, slippery thing that can be difficult to nail down exactly, right? But it can come from a lot of places. So I would say chase the inspiration that you find in the moment, the obvious inspiration. Partly, I mean, for me, like going out in nature is big, like hiking, jogging, running, appreciating trees and the natural environment. There's lots of beauty and inspiration to be found there. But then also go revisit the stuff that you thought was awesome when you were a kid, because you might find some really useful stuff there as well. Now I'm gonna try, so this, you can see the teeth here are extruded back and have walls that go back in space, but it looks like this guy's head is kind of hollow, right? So what I could do, I'm gonna try adding this volume mesher to a cloth surface. I'm going to turn the subdivisions down and turn the thickness up. And what that does is it adds sort of, it hollows the mesh out and adds sort of walls. Let's take a look inside. Whoops. Now you can see I made that too thick. Let's go to that less thick. See, now the interior mesh has some thickness. Gosh. All right, so now you can see, because the wall, instead of being a solid mesh, these walls have some thickness, so that allows there to be a hollow surface inside, which I think is actually working better, although I think perhaps it's too thick. Turn this down a little bit. I got some questions here. Thank you, Ramel. Appreciate you tuning in. I have tried making an art toy before, not one that I've made myself. I've done a lot of 3D printing. If you go to my website, diligence.studio, here, I'll type that in for you. Type .studio and look at the 3D prints. You can see some stuff that's similar to art toys that I've made in the past. I've also painted and customized some dunnies and some monies in the past, so I've dabbled a little bit. Brian Ewenick asks, have you always worked on your own, or have you ever had a position within an agency in-house? That's a great question. I spent the first 10 years of my career working at agencies. I started, I went to school for graphic design and illustration. Started off with a fairly traditional, graphic design and illustration career. I worked at a small boutique studio for a number of years, and then I was at a fairly large experiential event agency for, like nearly 7 years. Started out in their Philly office, moved to San Francisco with my wife, and I worked out of the San Francisco Bay Area office for a while and slowly worked my way up to associate creative director. But was super stressed. It was a really fast-paced, deadline-oriented industry, and I kind of burnt out. And all the while on the side, I'd been playing with Cinema 4D and doing my own illustration and animation, and I was saving my pennies and trying to make a client relationship here and there, and eventually I did make the jump and went out on my own. That was about 4 years ago. and it's been good. There's been struggles. Some days, you know, some months I should say have better income than others. Luckily, I'm sort of a saver. I'm not a big spender, which is really helpful. And so I think you need to prepare a little bit if you want to make the jump yourself. You gotta save a couple months rent and hopefully have a client or two ready to go. And then, yeah, I think if you have, built the skill set and are, inspired or passionate enough, then I think I would recommend making the jump. But I'm also really glad that I spent some time inside of agencies, because I learned a lot about, how to run a project, how to write a decent client email, how to, interact and, really be a commercial artist, let's say. So there's a lot to learn there. Right. Check this dude out. I'm getting there. Man, really, I'm having such a good time making this dude. He's really fun. Let's do some simple materials here as well. As simple as we can get, really. Cool thing about cinema is you can use, let's try this. What I can do is actually just use this eyedropper and pull colors directly from other files. Just kind of neat. Try that again. Make another material. I'll go through and customize these, but I just wanted to show that feature. It's kind of neat. Bam. Yellow. Edit. What's up, Vedant? Thanks for tuning in. Making some cool skateboard graphics today. I guess, while I'm working on this, it might be interesting to discuss fan art, right? Like, so this is, I guess, technically fan art. This is not my design. This is not my intellectual property, let's call it. This is an homage. This is something that I think is really fun to do as a practice for myself, as an exercise, and like I said, as an homage. I don't think it would be what's the word I'm looking for? Ethical. I don't think it would be ethical to try and sell this or make merch of it myself. I would certainly never try to pass this off as my own design. I've been giving props to Ed Templeton the entire time I've been on the stream, and I've been talking about what a huge inspiration he was growing up. I guess this was inspiration even before I knew that I would be drawing inspiration from him as someone doing a YouTube channel or as someone who would eventually become a professional illustrator. It's just something that I thought was awesome when I was, 14 years old. So there you go. All right. Another thing I think I want to do is, I'm going to just make a whole copy of this guy. I'm going to make some modifications. I always like to have a null group that I've turned off that I call off, which is sort of like, backup layers in Photoshop kind of a thing. Then, let's see, capsule. I'm going to subdivide this bad boy, because I'm going to need some more geometry. What I want to do is create some indentations here for the eyes. Now, a lot of times I would do this with symmetry to make sure that everything is perfectly symmetrical. You could turn symmetry on here in your brush options, but because this has sort of a loose, funky, asymmetrical quality to it, I'm going to avoid using symmetry. Also going to rotate this guy just a little bit. Rotate this guy a little bit too. There we go. That's better. if you see, like if I'm looking at this head on, actually let's go to this view. It is a little bit wonky and off center, but since this is a static illustration, I think that's fine, because we're going to be really just focusing on this single camera angle. Right, so maybe it's time to add a little bit of lighting to the scene. So I'm gonna throw on some ambient occlusion, GI. I like to throw on QMC as well here in the secondary method. The other thing, you know what, I haven't really used this much, but this is something you might want to check out inside of Cinema, is there's a whole bunch of presets under global illumination here. You could do interior stuff, you could do exterior, object visualization, and you could do them with like preview or high settings, which is kind of nice. I usually sort of do my own. That's something you can check out. I'm going to add sky object. The compositing tag, and I'm going to turn off scene by camera. I'm also just going to grab a sky object. I'm just going to search inside the content browser here. Just grab, actually, you know what? Let's get this guy going. That gives us right out of the gate. Not bad, not great. It's a start. I also want to add area light. I think is where we're going to derive most of our lighting from. Personal preference, I just like to keep my lights underneath my camera and my camera underneath my geometry. Just sort of the way I like to keep my stuff. Apologies for the barking dog in the background. He's mad at all the people working on our house. See, that looks a lot nicer, in my opinion. One thing I like to do, especially for something like this where we want to maintain sort of the graphic quality of the image, is I'm going to turn the specular down in the reflectance channel. Make it a little wider, a little less strong. Oh, that's too wide. Just to soften it up a little bit so we don't get that really kind of cheesy CG look. Even that, I think, looks a little nicer. Got here. I wonder if it's worth trying to add kind of a sketch and tune stroke. I don't know that it is. I'm not there yet. What I am going to do though, I'm going to turn down the sub Ds inside this mesher. Add a smooth layer. It's too smooth. I'm going to turn that down just a bit. Maybe around 50%. I'm going to do a little bit more sculpting here. I get these shoulder blades kind of depressed in there. Pop out of my camera here. Continue making little indentations to the eyes. This capsule. The eyebrow action. Because we have that smooth layer turned on, you can see that the geometry and what we're getting in terms of the output doesn't match exactly. I'm actually gonna turn the smooth layer down a little bit, get us closer to what our actual geometry is. Now, when I'm using the sculpt tools, if I hold Control down or Command on a Mac, the tool will do the opposite of what it typically does. So this pull tool, I think is this the pull tool? Yeah. When I click it and drag, normally it brings the surface up. When I hold control, it's going to push the surface down. You feel me? What we got? Yeah, a little better. A little better. We're smoothed out here. We've got sort of those indentations going on. Now, I want to improve sort of the surface quality of some of the stuff here. So, because we've got horns and eyes, I think they should be a little bit reflective. Reflections here. I'm going to add Beckman. I don't want much, you know, just maybe 10% here. I'm going to turn the roughness way up. Maybe even 8%. Let's see what that gets us. Not bad. I think I have a slightly more interesting angle. Area light. A bit more. So that's better. Get a little bit blown out. And we make this a little bit darker. Add some luminance to the skin. Turn that to 10%. Make it red. Then I'm going to add subsurface scattering, which I really love. Whoops, going to make that red as well. It'll let me in. Come on, buddy. Momentary freeze here. Boy. There we go. Y'all still with me? All right, so we make that sort of a dark red. Turn the path length down to maybe 7. Turn this down a little bit. This will allow the light to start penetrating through into the material itself. See how the color is more even. I want to turn, you know, maybe I'll turn the actual luminance off entirely and just deal with the subsurface scattering here. Also going to add a little bit of color to our ambient occlusion. All right, getting there. I want to move our shoulders back a little bit so we get more of a prominent chin. This chin going on in the monster. Also, I think get that by putting this guy's head back a little bit. See how that treats us. Better. I'm going to rotate this sky. See what that does for our lighting. And for our reflections really here too. A little better. Turn the shadows up a bit. 20% density. Add a little bit of color there too. A little better, a little better. I'm not loving this sort of interaction here. That. Now, this is not your typical best practices in modeling. Kind of smashing this side of the cheek in. That's not it. I think changing the angle of approach here is going to help a bit. Okay. Also think making this like more convex shape, yeah, that's going to help. Getting there, getting there. And this sort of highlights some of the difficulty that happens when you're taking a 2D graphic and trying to translate it into 3D. Keep going. We'll get it. We'll get it. Making some additional cuts in the spline here. Basically another row of teeth. There we go. I think we were a little bit too deep on this extrusion. All right, really getting there. Okay, cool. I'm sort of bringing back some of this cheek geometry that I pushed way in. That might actually be working against me a little bit right now. It's funny, if we were doing this symmetrically from a head-on perspective, this would be kind of easy stuff to do, but since I'm translating a 2D graphic into 3D, well, it's a little trickier. This is fairly tortured. But sometimes it takes a lot of tweaking and back and forth. And like I said at the top, this is an unrehearsed show, so making this up as I go. Here's another idea. What's up, Yusuf? That's it's very kind of you to say. I don't know if I'm quite the king. And actually, if you're watching me struggle with this little here, maybe you'd realize I'm not. but I appreciate it nonetheless. All right, there we go. Thanks, Yusuf. That's really good to hear. Appreciate it. All right, we're getting really close. Oops. All right, let's check that out. I think that works. I might be able to live with that. Let's see how it looks if we add a little bit more thickness to our cloth surface. Yes, getting there. Yes, thank you. A little bit tedious there to get through that. We definitely want some more thickness there. Let's keep adding that. Here's another fun little trick in the material palette. You can copy, paste the color. I'm gonna try this. What happens if we go really luminant textures here? Let's go for more of a flat look. That's kind of cool. I'm not digging it though. I'm not gonna do that. Just maybe a little bit, maybe 5%, something like that. I don't like it. It's kind of blown out here. Nice. I'm going to go inside the subsurface scattering here and turn down the path length a little bit, which is basically the depth that the light will pass through the surface of an object. Now I'm going to try a few different lighting setups here. I'm not totally satisfied with the lighting on this one. Try bringing the luminance way down on this dude. I just got a little bit of them. Quick test. I'm going to try, while that's testing, while that's going, I'm going to add another area light. Back. This one, turn down significantly, 50%, and then I'm going to throw it sort of in the blue range of things. That gives us a little bit of like a rim light back here. Kind of neat. So let's test something else. I actually kind of like the way that's going, but in the meantime, let's test something else. So I'm gonna put that in a null, call it light setup 1, turn it off, and then I'm gonna try something completely different. Let's get a spotlight. Since this guy's a monster, it's kind of intimidating. Let's do that like flashlight under the chin style lighting. Take a low light, take this spotlight from below, angle it up fairly aggressively, make a area light, add a little bit of warmth to this light. Let's see what we get. I'm gonna give it a very different feel. Might be cooler. That is pretty neat. Let's try it. This light setup. I'm going to make a copy of this sky. Bring it outside. So we have a little bit of fill light. What do you guys think? This lighting setup's working better. Let's compare the two. Group that, call it light setup 2. Let's go back to this guy, and inside the fill light, I'm going to make it much bluer. Bring the intensity down a little bit more, make it much bluer. Let's start comparing these two. Both look kind of neat. What I'm going to do here is inside this luminance channel, I'm going to add some red. So since this, maybe even if I go to multiply, let's try it. Actually. Since I've got this image, this HDRI image turned down, I can go ahead and like add some color to it. Now that's gonna make things very red. It might be worth checking out. Let's see what that does. The dog's barking at me now. Let's try this. I want the light to go a little bit further. I'm going to turn gamma up to 2 here. Didn't like sort of the shadows here were a little too dense. You can definitely see the effect that adding that red to the sky object had on the piece. I actually kind of like it. Might be too red in this second option, yeah. Let's turn the saturation down there a little bit. This might be the color or the lighting setup that we wind up with, actually. I'm going to turn the gamma down just a touch. Try this again. Getting close. All right. Try another thing, actually. make a black material. Call it dark gray. We're losing some of the contrast in the teeth here. Might be nice is to turn that black so we get a little bit more contrast there. I mean, the cool thing about this character is that toothy mouth, right? And if we don't have enough contrast in that area, you're going to sort of lose it. You're not going to see it as well as you'd like. That helps, actually. I really like that. I'm going to turn reflectance down again. It's making it light, especially here as the light's hitting it. What's up, Katik? Sorry about my pronunciation there. What am I going to do here? Let's I want to make the interior surface of this dark. I think what I want to do is make a copy of this capsule. Let's see how this goes. I just copy this guy, make him smaller. Add the dark material to it. Is that going to work? I'm not sure that it will. That doesn't work. Here's something I can try. It's kind of dangerous here. This will remove a lot of the editability. We're getting close. I can just try this. I'm going to turn this spool off by putting it in my off null. And then, let's see, I'm going to make this editable. So now we've just got one mesh. And go inside. I'm going to get out of my camera. Inside. Select the interior edge of this. Interior surface. Inside, and then I just add material. See how this works. I think that might have done it. Yeah, and that's going to go a long way, I think, in making this feel like the original version. Now we've eliminated, all of the editability here, which isn't necessarily ideal. Yeah, look how much better that looks, because now we have that contrasty mouth that is really stark against the red of the skin. That's cool. I'm gonna add just a little bit of the redness back here, just a touch. Give it some of that warmth. Yeah, I like that. Just a bit of warmth, right? But we still have that really high contrast look, which is awesome. Cool. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm noticing a little bit of kind of a hiccup there, just to be nice and smooth. So. Kind of eyebrow area had a little funkiness going on. Let's see if we've addressed that. I can almost tell it's not addressed. Also turn, the Fong angle is pretty high already. Flatten the back of the head here a little bit. Whoa, way too much. Yeah, this comes down at a different angle. This is kind of vertical here, and this has a slight angle to it. Try and address that. Also, I'll scoot the mouth is actually closer to the eyes here, isn't it? Yeah. And I'm realizing that this has more teeth than I think I've added to mine, but that's all right. I don't want it to be exactly the same. I mean, it's quite close. Yeah, that feels better. Yeah, that made a pretty big difference, actually, those two little adjustments. I'll do one more test rendering because I've altered this material a little bit. We still have a little bit of a hiccup there above the eye. What's going on? I could always do is go into a subdivision surface too, which will smooth some of that stuff out. Still getting it. Part of that might also be the angle of the light. Here's another thing we can try. Let's get a smoothing deformer. Add that to the mesh. Yeah, it kind of smooths things out. I don't want it all the way up. Let's turn it down a little bit. Good, maybe around 50. That definitely smoothed that out. We lost a little bit of the indentations around the eye, but I think that's all right, actually. Cool. Feeling pretty good about this. So I'm going to go to 1080 by 1080. GI. Turn up the settings a bit. Same with ambient occlusion. Let's go with 75% accuracy. Let's output this with an alpha channel, so I can add a simple colored background in Photoshop. Let's let it rock. Well, that's rocking. Let's fire up Photoshop and check out the original sticker. I guess something I was working on the other day as well. I might as well show you. Here's another skate graphic for Santa Cruz skateboards that I thought was really awesome. Probably gonna work on one of these at some point. This is going to be more challenging to model. I think it'll take a little longer than what we could accomplish on a single episode of the practice, which is why I went for a little bit of a simpler character design here. But something like that will probably hit my Instagram account at some point in the future. So check me out there, DLGNCE. I think I have that handle visible right now on the stream. Cool. So let's save this dude out. Let's do it into Photoshop. Cool. And then see, now that we have an alpha background, Just go solid color. I think what might be nice is to do something similar to what we did inside the mouth. Just give it like a really dark red. Or I mean, crazy to go with like a yellow. Choices, huh? Something cool about that harsh black. Try it really dark red. Another thing we could try is stroke. I'm not sure if I'm gonna love this. Outside, right? And now it's a lot more like the sticker was. But the sticker also has things going in, or the outlines going in and out. So I'm not going to do that. I don't like that. I'm also going to adjust the placement of this guy, get him centered a little better. Let's adjust the curves a little bit brighter. I like to add blue to the shadows. Just the type of dude I am. Too much here. I have to go really subtle. So much of this image is in that dark range, as you can see in the histogram here. Turn that down a little just by adjusting the opacity. Now, I would always recommend working with adjustment layers where you can, instead of altering the image itself. Levels, some levels, adjust the contrast a little bit. Ooh, you know what? This dark blue looks pretty nice, actually. I'm gonna do that. That's what I like. Feeling it. One last adjustment here. Maybe bump that saturation up a little. Yellows. No, that's too much. Actually, do we even need it? Just subtly. So I'm going to turn the opacity down on that as well. All right. Well, congratulations, you guys. You made it to the end. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you to Ed Templeton for influencing my taste in character designs and providing amazing skateboard graphics from the 90s that really, I think to a certain extent, have stuck with me today. This is a really fun little exercise. I hope you all took something away from it. If you did, if you think any of your pals would find it useful, please share it. If you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to drop one in the comments below. I try to get back to pretty much everybody. If you want to keep up with me and the work that I'm doing, hit me up at DLGNCE on Instagram and all the social medias. Appreciate each and every one of you. Stay after it. Stay hungry. Keep making cool stuff. I'd love to see what you're working on. So tag me in anything that you post that you've worked on during the practice. And this is Stuart saying goodbye. See you next week. Later, gang.